Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Neblime against the Shambler. In this case, it is still ZVZ. I'm not sure if that will persist through the 3 games that we have for you today. But we are going to be on a new map called Starlight Station, and it is by Ben Taberski. Now, I know what you guys might be thinking. Is this just a Shambler Neblime Mystery Meat channel now, as far as the players are concerned? Well, they're the ones who sent in the replays, so if you want your games casted, well, you got to place them and then send in those replays. We'll see if we end up featuring any additional people. I think there's some 2v2s that I'm going to try to cast, but honestly, I have no idea what the version is yet, so I have to track that one down a little bit more thoroughly, using timestamps to cross-reference everything. But anyway, that's a separate thing. Now, we do have, of course, Neblime in the top right and Shambler in the bottom left. Shambler, in theory, should be favored because of his familiarity with the project, but whenever you have a new map, it's a little bit harder to be super familiar. It also looks like maybe both of our players are thinking about... Well, actually, Neblime is just going to go ahead and scout. I don't know what this worker is for, but we will see. And yeah, as you can see, I can still multi-select everything, so isn't that lovely? I'm not sure if this is their first game on the map, but this map by Ben Taberski is supposedly one of his better efforts, or one of his more recent efforts. He was definitely interested in seeing the way that the map played out, and I am too. So we'll see. And again, we have 3 matches here today, so you can think of it as a best of 3. There's also 3 more matches, but they're played on Boscovine, and they're played in the same day, so I'll just have that be a separate video. We'll just see where this one goes. So, yeah, Shambler definitely idled his worker a little bit too long there, but it will be a Hydrock opener for him, and it's still a Zorkis for Neblime, holding fast to the idea that he can use Zorkis in any context, at least to get into a later stage of the game, where he can start to mix and match things about ZVZ. This will have been played after the best ZVZ to date, so if you watched that castover, that was released yesterday, you should check that out. It's a pretty good one. Nice long ZVZ on Otherworld. And I feel pretty good about Otherworld, actually. So, you know, we're talking about maps and such. It'll be neat to see this one be put through its paces, because I feel like if we get more unique maps in this sense, more new maps or whatever for the next Ascension tournament, that'll be pretty nice. However, unlike that terrain block, that is not nice. And then there's like some weird fuckery over there too, but it seems to work just fine. Some tickling is occurring. Was not going to be good enough for Shambler to take the fight anyway, but Neblime still got a little antsy. And Neblime will be going for an expansion at some point. So he looks like he's going to have a bit of a better tempo. Does he have any unit in production? He has a single Gorger core in production, so that's what he's gone for. A little bit wary of a Skith first opener, which is indeed what's going to happen. So the Gorg will hatch probably before the Skither core can get more than 1 worker kill here. Because of the durability of the Skith, I would like to see at least 1 worker kill. But it seems like he's not super wary. He's a little bit too wary of the Gorg. Now the Gorg will start to hunt down the Droleth, and this is where again Shambler could be using the Skither core to kill workers, right, or you know, wound workers or something to keep this Gorger core back at home while he builds his own Spraith, which has just completed. I suspect we'll see pretty good numbers of Hydras come out soon, and yes, indeed, we do indeed have the Skither core coming back to try to do some damage. He's actually going to try to kite it, which is kind of cute. But, you know, overall, I'm not so sure. It does deal full damage, but it's 8 damage. It's not that much. He does spot the Hydrock Den coming up, and, of course, the Spraith will put an end to any harassment. So, Shambler didn't get as much as what he wanted, but at the very least, he kept the Gorger core away from his base, right? So there's that. And he can also sit over here and start heckling the Hatrosk. There is no other Gorger core, no other combat unit coming out. A Lakizalisk now, but obviously not going to help too much versus the units in the sky. So we'll have to see what Shambler wants to do there. He's going to get tickled to, not death, but to something. And meanwhile, this Gorg is obviously going to be zoned away by the Hydras. It's actually not too bad. He can, you know, he can continue heckling and just being a little bit of a nuisance here while Neblime tries to figure out what to do. I was told that none of these games end immediately, so that should pose pretty well for us, but I also don't know what they mean by immediately. Like, their idea of, you know, no, these games weren't total disasters. It could mean that they end in 5 minutes instead of 4, but we'll see. Right now, I can't really see either player having too much kill pressure. The Hydras are on their way, and you can see the path is kind of circuitous, where you go, like, off to the right, and there's a little bit of a spiral to it, right? It's kind of neat as far as the overall construction of the map. And so after our customary air unit opener, we were starting to see Hydras and Lakizalisks and such for Neblime. Him getting off to his early expansion, which is fairly well insulated from ground attacks, assuming he can hold the ramp. But obviously does need a Spraith over here to prevent the Skither core from tickling him. And so he's already going to be doing that. In fact, what Shambler could do, and I don't think he knows this yet, is he could try to use the Skither core to go straight for a... Oh, he's actually going to... Ooh, he lost vision of the Lakizalisk, and he was not microing his army. Yeah, that's rough, man. Oh my god, utter devastation here for Shambler. If he had just walked past it, he could have just attacked a bunch of Drolets, but he already knows. He really missed an opportunity to do some pretty lethal damage there. So with Burrow being much more responsive now, I increased the burrow time of the Lekizalisk to compensate, because one of the things that I had done a while ago for the Lekizalisk was reduce the amount of time the burrow animation actually took. We do see over here, even though there's some egg cancellation happening, which is kind of funny. Yeah, we're not going to see too much else, it looks like. Hunted down, and the workers were idling for quite a while. Still idling. This is like 30 seconds plus of worker idling here for Shambler. He's only now going to fix that. Maybe a little bit flustered after that first match. He does have 4 Hydras on the front, so he's going to guard against a move out, you know. Has to be something coordinated with the Lekizalisks, which obviously they do regenerate faster when burrowed, so yeah. In this case, he loses 1 Hydra for his troubles, but obviously the Lekizalisks will zone him out. I will say with the new audio, I hope you guys are enjoying that. The weapon fire sound effect for the Lekizalisk being different now does, for me anyway, feel very distinct from the Hydralisk now. And so, and obviously for the Droleth. You know, we'll see what people think overall, but I feel like these kinds of improvements are really important for at-a-glance visibility, readability of what's actually happening. Audibility? I guess that might be a thing. Legibility. You know, what is actually possible to derive, right? Worker count definitely in Neblime's favor here. He's going to go ahead and secure another base. I'm trying to really emphasize this. Shambler has in theory, better army, right? That's his advantage here. But if he's not able to close versus he has an Avaleth, or no, he doesn't. No, that was the Avaleth for Neblime, actually. There's nothing in that Avaleth at the very least, but he's, you know, going to use it to scout out and such. There's no Avaleth here to reveal the Lekizalisks, and this is, of course, cliff advantage, so you have to watch out for that. Man, these ramps are really messed up. You got to use the brush palette, guys. The brush palette is your savior. It will tell you how to blend these more seamlessly. It was a funny interaction where people were saying, how do I fix this? They're always busted. And I told them, use the brush palette. And then somebody had the same question, and I had the same answer, because it was like a different context, but same solution. So I thought it was kind of amusing that I just said use the brush palette to both of them right after the other in the Discord server, which of course is linked in the description if you want to join. So we do have more stuff going down for both of our players, but realistically speaking, it's just going to be Neblime camping up to tier 2. The Lekizalisks are firing on all of these units right now, and the front line is dead for both players, but there's equal number of Hydras even when you don't factor in the Lekizalisks. So yeah, I think Shambler just got gutted completely, and now is probably going to be in danger of getting owned, because he just doesn't have the macro that Neblime has. He has similar worker count, but across less bases, and obviously less production as a result, right? 1 Larvosk Cesiant for Neblime, and 3 Hatcherosks. There's 1 and 2, respectively. Quazeth, or Quaz Rockpool, I haven't renamed it yet, is on the way. So that's going to opt for some kind of opportunity here, maybe Shambler can like defend by holding the ramp. I don't think he can, but maybe he can. If he defends while holding the ramp, despite his stubborn refusal to build detection. He does get the single Lekizalisk, but there's another one back there, and there's so many other units. He has no anti-surface defense here. I think this might already be GG. Neblime finding the opportunity before tier 2 to punish Shambler for never building an Avaleth. And yeah, I think all of his combat units are pretty much dead. He has 1 somewhere, I'm not sure where it is. Oh, it's right. Well, no, there's there. And no GG anyway. So Shambler apparently... He didn't type, and as a result, he didn't GG. That's really weird. He sighed. That was all we got. All right, well, on to the next one. This time, Shambler has rolled Terran, I believe. Yes, that's indeed the correct thing that has happened here. We'll see what he wants to do with this newfound race, this race that he doesn't play too often. Now, it's funny because, in theory, Terran is the worst race for Shambler, but it's also a more defensive race. And if you understand the macro game and, you know, putting Neblime through his paces, then that might be a situation where you can do some Ahmed drops or something to that effect. You know, I'm a pretty big fan of Hurakan drops. Some people have been discussing how Sundogs are pretty good now that they've been revised. I mean, they were already pretty good anyway, but they're still good despite losing AoE with their new combat role. And also on top of that, it feels like, you know, the Cyclops revision is going okay. People haven't really talked too much about that, but I feel like it's in a stronger position, more in terms of identity, but also in terms of the way that it interacts with units in a different way as far as the splash goes. It's much more like, you know, the protocol is much more about like, hey, let's see what we can make happen here. With regards to stunning and holding people in place and all this other stuff, there's a lot of innate synergy with Lobotomy Mine, for example, that I feel pretty good about. So I'm expecting Shambler to go for a quarry here. Where's that quarry? Give us that quarry. There it is. So he figured it out and is going to go ahead and drop that. Workers are going to pass each other like ships in the night because I think... Actually, I don't know why Neblime's worker took that path, actually. No idea. Lard writes a pathfinding algorithm. But that's okay. It's not really going to matter too much because, you know... I guess maybe if he was going random, he might not have expected there to be a Mason. So maybe there's a little bit of information there. But his playstyle is pretty stable. Neblime always seems to go Zorka's opener. And, of course, the Mason scouting him will not be surprised to see that. So what's going to be the response? I mean, a single Watchdog, which you might want anyway, even if it's for something other than a fast Gorgocore. And what are you going to do about it? Instant heckling. Shambler responds by withdrawing at about half HP. Mason DPS is deceptive, but it's not going to be good enough for that. Now, the Maverick is actually... He's just going to stream a couple of Mavericks across the map, which is kind of interesting, because obviously if he sees the fast Gorg, he can do some damage there. And with the added 5 seconds of the Zorka Shroud, which I do believe is in now, that obviously is going to contribute towards these Mavericks being capable of doing some damage. Stimpack only deals 5 damage to the unit now, and they have more HP anyway. So, yeah, coming up behind the mineral field and everything, that's going to be pretty good. So, the first unit is Azorius, which is not a bad shout in this particular case. He's denying mining time, but he really wants to get worker kills. And he just charges directly forward in, is instantaneously going to get blown up there by the worker surround. He hasn't gotten a single worker kill just yet, and the Azorius is out. That does mean that the Maverick probably wants to go home. It's not really the end of the world if you lose the Maverick on this case, but maybe you could, like, theoretically try to jump off to the right side or something and then, like, come back in as a scout later on. Instead, it's just going to be hunted down by the Zorius. Absolutely bamboozled. He's coming for you! Oh, he got you! Absolutely got you. The Gorgocore on the way. There is a Watchdog here, but it's not going to be in position to defend this Mason, I don't believe. Is going to want to pull these Masons to the right-hand side there to prevent it from getting absolutely shellacked, but it doesn't look like it matters too much. The Zorius is here. What can the Zorius do? Hey, repair that Cyprian. Fuck yeah. Yeah, that's not going to work out too well. What do you do versus such rampant aggression in the early game? 400 minerals in the bank. He's going for Hurricanes. He needs to burn that armor. He's losing some Masons, though. This is not going to be too good for him. Obviously, he can rebuild them, but trying to fight the Rillarokors, they do have lifesteal, so they can sustain in these kinds of fights. Here comes Ahmed. And the Zorius knows better than to fuck with Ahmed. Or does he? Yeah, that Gorgocore is really not going to be too useful in this fight. I think a stemmed Maverick would kill him now. But you know what? He's slowly regenerating some life. More Ahmeds. Big fan. Expansion already up here for Neblime, but he's not saturating it just yet. What are these Droleths? Yeah, okay, those eggs are Droleths. He finally remembers to unburrow that worker. That's almost like killing a worker, you know, having it burrow for so long. Neblime lost track of that. Good that we caught that. And yeah, the Zorius just sort of running around wondering what's going on here. It's weird that Shambler had so much money, but didn't have his stockades pumping any units out. So that's a bit strange. I feel like maybe he like got fluffed at some point. He's actually not harvesting any gas anymore either, so he's going to have to correct that if he wants to use the star pad for anything. He only has 3 plus 3. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, Ahmed, save me. There you go, starting to save him with Ahmed. That's a funny interaction, too, is the burn damage onto the Zorius, obviously, will, if they're not incubating already, will proc the incubation. So there's a lot of moving parts happening in this particular game. Gorgocore was just remembered as we spotted it ourselves. That's always good. And yeah, you know, enjoying being up a base. That's where Neblime is at right now. Another stockade. It's clearly going to be Ahmed drops. But what will this Gorgocore do? There's a second Watchdog here, so I'm going to go ahead and say nothing. It will do nothing. Will we see a Vestry add-on? We do see, you know, full saturation on this gas here, and then partial saturation on the ridge. Just got one worker. And obviously, if he continues to, upgrade his saturation on his minerals, he can start to think about going for something else, something a little bit more emphatic, like getting another base, for example. There is a circuit here for anti-drop, but it's just one circuit, and it will melt to a lot of Achmeds. I mean, fittingly, since they fucking light shit on fire. Going to be Cyprians in the anchor, familiar sight. And here comes the drop. The first Trojan, anyway. Will there be another one, or what? Dude, bring one Maverick with you. No? Okay, just 7. Just 7 Achmeds. He's just going to go straight for the drops. This could catch Neblime off guard. He only has a Spraith in his base, but he has a Lekizalisk as well. Now, again, that seems like it should work, but if the Lekizalisk is conveniently where he's dropping, the Hurricanes will probably just kill it. So that's going to potentially catch him off guard. He should know that it's a possibility, and he did not bring an Ansil because he doesn't have one. So where does he actually want to unload? He should definitely unload right here. Okay, he's going to unload. And yeah, because he's dropping right on top of it, the Lekizalisk does indeed die. And so there goes the Spraith, and the Trojan lives with one Spraith shot remaining to tell the tale. There are some Izira cores here, but they will need to... Oh, never mind. There's a little bit of group damage dealt by the Lekizalisks. But a lot of workers died to that just from the splash, and he had to remorph the Kagrin and lost the Lekizalisk. So I'd say because he kept the Trojan alive, Shambler comes out on top on that, and even, maintains some parity between him and his opponent as far as worker counts are concerned. He's retaken his ramp as far as emphasis goes. He's going to go ahead and scout this out and maybe drop a base or maybe a watchdog or something over here. Yeah, it's going to be a watchdog. So that's fine. That makes sense. And then he'll be taking that with the treasury. There is still a Gorga core over here, but versus one watchdog, it's going to give him some idea of where to go. Bunch of burrowed Zorius mixed in with some burrowed Izira cores. I'm thinking about this too. I wonder if it's possible to make the burrow mounds uniquely identifiable for each unit or something. As opposed to being like, oh, this is funny. Yeah. Lure him in. Yeah. Yeah, get him. Yeah, you can see there. Watchdog's absolutely slapping that guy, so he's going to go back to regenerating health again so that he can do that maneuver one more time. Another Lekizalisk. I imagine there's going to be more than just a couple Lekizalisks here on each base. There's 2 in the main, for example. There is going to be a drop over here with an Avaleth to take that island base, which is kind of neat. We didn't see that in play before. That's where this Gorg is. You could imagine maybe like the treasury lifts off and lands over there instead, right? Yeah. In fact, I guess the worker or the race that it would have the hardest difficulty, the biggest difficulty trying to take an island base would probably be Protoss. But the embassy is kind of like an integral part of build orders in PvP, like not Protoss versus Protoss, but actual player versus player, competitive play, because you want witnesses, right? So that's a pretty big deal. Still just on one Trojan, he's going to go ahead and continue the Huracan drops as we currently see them. Very interesting stuff. Glad to see this become a bit more of a meta thing. Now, he could go for that island, but he doesn't actually know that it exists yet, right? So maybe he would scout it out just to see. And also because maybe it provides him like a better flanking position onto the main or something. But it looks like he's idling nearer to the main. So yeah, I think he's just gonna... He's not even gonna spot the Kager there. So, okay, the drop happens. Neblime is in the area to respond. He's just going to pull the workers immediately. But as soon as the Lekizalisk is spotted, especially multiple ones, that kind of indicates to you that, like, oh shit, I should have maybe not done that. You could have at least killed one of the Lekizalisks, but instead they all died. And I don't think that the Trojan withdrew in a way that was possible to see this base or the Kager there. So eventually we would like to be able to like click on our names or something and then use that as an opportunity to only see their vision. Or maybe toggle that player's vision, so I click Neblime to see Shambler's vision because I toggle off that vision or something. Something like that. I know that happens in, I think, Starcraft Remastered. I don't remember. But, adding more and more of those features in is important. IMO. So, yeah, you can see here Neblime is guarding pretty much all of the bases. Like, this one is not being guarded, but all of the other bases on the side of Shambler are being guarded here. As he's teching up to Tier 2, he's going up against a player who himself is banking up enough gas. He can actually drop a Tier 2 himself, yeah. So you want to be a little bit further ahead along your Tier 2 by the time that Zerg gets there, generally speaking, because obviously it is more, you could say, pricier, right? And so, yeah, in that particular case, it seems like Shambler is minorly behind. You look at the economics, obviously he's behind in worker counts by 8, but you can make that 10 because his workers are also idling and stuff. Maybe a little bit more than 8, actually. He might be behind by 12 by the way workers or something effectively. And obviously he's behind in terms of base count because of this island base that has been taken. So that's going to slowly scale up in terms of the amount of gas available to Neblime. And he is starting to add some fulcrums, which he'll use to hold it looks like. Yeah, just continuing to see what's up here. I like the Rillarokor, you know, not expiring because there's a borrowed Zoristalith there. Gort Zergline. I have no idea what he's saying. Oh, this was when we were experimenting with advisor changes, so I think there might have been some fuckery related to that. That's already been fixed, though. Yeah, he really confused Neblime there. Honestly, you should just start saying like random shit like that, and then like not refuse to elaborate further. So that's that would be pretty funny. So anyway, the Atlas is complete. So hacks, intel. Well, it's going to be a Muthrock Spire here as well as a Quasa. Okay, so this is interesting. He's not going for the Gorgrel. This is what normally happens with Zerg. It looks like maybe Mutas are going to be on the cards. I'm not sure that they're going to be super well equipped to deal with this, but more Fulcrums are being added. Palladium's finally being added. Shambler finished his typing. Still only on 2 bases. Meanwhile, obviously Neblime going up to a 4th base. So I think Neblime is posed in a good way. You know, he's posturing very well here. He's gotten ahead with the early engagement, and he's turned that into a macro advantage that Shambler, despite the attempt with the Hurricanes, wasn't super effective. He could have shut this base down before it really turned into anything and maybe done something there, but obviously it didn't end up happening, so. Mutas are on the way. Got some already out. Neblime does like his Mutas. This Kagrin is finished, or mutating into a Nidus. We'll see where it ends up going. And he's actually going to try Kaffirlosks along with the Gorgrel Swamp. So the only thing he's going to be able to mutate out of this besides Vorverkors is the units out of the Gorgrel. That's worth noting. But maybe he'll upgrade his Quasarok into a Leveril at some point. More Watchdogs being put down. That's going to be good for anti-muta, but obviously they're a little bit more durable now, a little bit more powerful now, being that they are a Tier 2 unit, and Tier 2 means something more than it meant in stock StarCraft. His ground army is nowhere near to be seen, and Shambler hasn't really done too much poking out, right? So he's just going to go ahead and continue the attempt at grabbing the Phalanxes, but he's not going to have too much of a great defense against Mutas, right? He's not going to have, like, Madrigals out, for example. So if there is, like, a massive flock of them here, which we see, obviously, there's, 10 out that we can see already? Yeah, that's going to be somewhat significant. He's actually turning most of his Hatrosks, at least half of them, into Kaffirlosks, which is a little bit puzzling. Like, it's a bit spooky to think about. Because he might get in... I mean, he has a lot of Larvosks, so maybe it's fine, but that's something to think about. Oh my god! Imagine his own Rillarokor killed him. I can't believe it. Well, it is a storm of bio coming out here, with Hurricanes galore as well. More units coming out of these stockades. The Treasury will finally start landing over here for a 3rd base for Shambler. But, you know, at this stage, again, you know, Neblime just has so many bases. Double the base count currently, and there's not really enough Masons to transfer over immediately. The Anchors are on their way moving over, but the Mutas can attack in a different angle, and with that, I mean, okay, there's some Madrigals. I think at this patch, yeah, we don't have the fix for them sometimes firing their shot in Imperioso mode before finishing the turn. I did fix that recently. It was actually a really easy fix, too, so I feel a little bit bad that it was broken for so long. But either way, it's something to note. There are more Madrigals here as well, so they're coming. They're coming. He's actually going to station some over here, it looks like, in the deployed mode, which is not going to be too bad for anti-harassment, for sure. He has an empty anchor over here, and he's going to go ahead and path some Cyprians over there. Of course, there is going to be a full-blown charge. What can happen over here? There's some Achmeds. There's a bunch of them that are not actually attacking right now. And here come the Mutas trying to break apart the Phalanx line. Obviously, they don't have any armor in siege mode, so that's going to be really significant. But a bunch of them have already fallen to the Cyprian shots. And the Iziricors, they're still alive. They might actually survive with additional Vorbs coming up as well to help. Yeah, I think they are going to survive, and that's going to force the lift up. Here's the Madrigal. It goes ahead and deploys, and as well as with the Cyprians here, that's going to burst down the Mutas. But is that going to be enough to hold off this force and reclaim this base with more treasuries? Goes ahead and deploys into the multi-target mode again, but it's pretty close to the ramp, and there's nobody repairing it, so that ends up falling. But, okay, he held the ramp, and that was really all that Neblime had immediately available. He has got some Bactylisks again. I imagine most of those are coming out from Kaffirlosks, so would quite heavily surprise me if those were going to regress. Obviously, we don't have a read yet, but something to work on. I talked about that in the previous cast over as well. what does Shambler want to do now? He's trying to secure his third base. He's depleted the minerals in his main, so he'll be getting less of an income return from that. Same is actually true for neblime, so they're parity there, but yeah, right now he's enjoying having a 5th base up, while Shambler is still trying to reestablish his 3rd. And he does not have the anchors up. He does not have any additional defenses. And with Bacthalysk here to chew up his forces, this is going to force the lift. And I'm actually not sure that he can hold back this attack, right? Bacthalysk takes so long to actually move around the map, but maybe with undeployed madrigals on the cliff, he can do something. But this is where you would want Phalanx, is obviously further back, and he has lost most of those. And you can see there, yeah, the madrigal is getting eaten up quite a bit. There's still one left alive, but it's not going to be too long for this world at this point. There you can see it being blown up underneath the treasury, which is now also being subject to absolute massacring. And yeah, there just wasn't enough artillery here. Phalanxes are in the production queue, but there's nothing else to add to their firepower. Getting ensnared as well. Madrigal's trying to get hunted down there. There's the bounce off of one that was healthy to kill the one that was not. And that is probably going to be yet another GG no GG actually, in favor of neblime. So will he take all 3 matches in this set, or are we going to see Shambler come back onto the board? Let's find out. Let's get into the final match of the set. Neblime is now in the top right, and Shambler is playing as Protoss. So he's actually gotten all of the different races in this set, which is pretty neat. We'll see if he can contend with Neblime as the race that he played most recently in Ascension, competitive play, for Cosmonic Brood War, the most ambitious mod you've ever seen for StarCraft. And maybe ever. Although, probably not maybe ever. But at the very least, in terms of like the RTS side and trying to push forward completely new ideas in a cogent and interesting manner, a genuine manner, where it really is trying to see what it can do differently and seeing whether or not that provides something good and new and say a foundation for the future of the RTS genre as a whole, perhaps, or at least a future path for it to take, of course. I think that's all true. However, that doesn't really flow as well as simply saying the most ambitious StarCraft mod. So there you go. That's pretty much it. Now, say what you want about what we're doing here. Gateway is already up for Shambler, so he's going to go for a mineral-heavy option and only now starting to harvest gas. Going to be going a safe opener, it seems like. Assuming the enemy is going to go for his tried and true Zorkhiz opener, regardless of who he's facing, which indeed is the case. Yes, once again, Neblime is going to go that way. So Drakodins are going to be pretty reasonable against Gorgokors. Ecclesiasts can help because whatever unit the Gorg is on, the Ecclesiast can regenerate shields to buy more time of durability. So that's always nice. And actually, I think it's... I can't remember how many shields you regenerate. I think it might only be 2. It used to be 5 before flash shielding. But if it was still 5, that would be really absurd because it's like half of the damage of the Gorg deals is undone every time the the unit gets healed or the ability gets procced, right? So what does Shambler want to do here? He's just going to continue scouting around and seeing what's up. He sees a Zorkhiz Shroud. Not really any surprise there. We've been talking about contextual rally recently on the Discord server, and basically what that means is like if you task a rally onto the worker, onto the resource, and you train a worker, that worker will be going for an instantaneous harvest, right? So that's pretty useful for players, you could say, but I'm noticing that many players are idling workers for a decent amount of time, and it does kind of hurt to think in my head that by making a change like this, I would be essentially making their play better without them actually improving. But that's also, migrating away from Brood War and into our own game, sort of like what I was just talking at the beginning of this particular match, right, when I was waxing philosophical about what CMBW truly is. Yeah, that it's interesting to think about, but it's also like, what are you really going to do, Maybe it's something that we just do, and then we see how we can make macro play skillful still in a way that isn't just a chore. Because that's really what it comes down to, is I agree that it is a chore, and I agree you should have contextual rally. But if you remove it, suddenly bad players are able to play much better than they were before without any improvement, which is really like the core thing that bothers me, you could say. So this time around, we see Neblime going for a Larvosk before his Hatterosk for his expansion. So his expansion is going to be a little bit slower than it was previously. Azorius is going to come up to scout. It will see a couple Drakodins and an Idol with a Warden in the backline. Actually, a trio of Drakodins. Just going to confirm that there's no base in the back. This is actually a really useful scout for Neblime. This is sort of like the ground-based version of him scouting with Azazels, right? Because it's just like a very durable unit that can just walk away. There was no attempt at body blocking it by Shambler, so he could have actually killed it there. But it's still pretty funny that, and probably slightly annoying, maybe slightly tilting that, oh, you're gonna fucking let me you're gonna do that to me. That's really what you're gonna do. You're gonna do that to me. All right, you fucker. I see you. Meanwhile, Gorgorkor is gonna go ahead and poke its head over here, but there is a warden to move it away. I was actually thinking about this recently, too. The Watchdog does a lot of damage for a cheap defensive anti-air structure. And maybe that's fine, but maybe it should fire 2 missiles so that they get further reduced by armor, and otherwise its damage can remain unchanged. That might work out, because then versus light units that are a little bit more on the swarmy side, it's kind of unchanged. And then versus really durable units, it might deal slightly less damage, because it's, reducing 20 by 2 is not the same as reducing 10 by 2 twice, obviously. So it would go from 18 damage to 16 damage, as an example, for the Gorgorkor specifically. But it wouldn't make a massive difference overall, but it's something to think about. Now, double Lekizalisk is going to immediately put this force further back. So there you go. Confirmed the presence of that. And yeah, this is a very safe opener. When you have that single ramp entrance into your base, Lekizalisks can hold that for an indeterminate amount of time when there's no detection. And a second automaton register was what Shambler chose to go for, which is kind of interesting because, realistically speaking, he could have done something a little bit more macro-oriented, or he could have gone for an embassy because he knows that Neblime likes to go for the Lekizalisk defense. So if he wanted to try to end the game early or get some economic damage early, that could have been something that he did. Meanwhile, the Zorius just happily walks away from enemies again. There will be a Nexus dropped over here, so Shambler will go ahead and expand. He's going to be behind in terms of economics. And he has queued up additional idols. Idols, if you're not aware, deal AoE on their projectile, but their projectile is dumb fire, you can say. That's where Yustalef was finally dealt with. So by dumb fire, I mean it does not track, so it does not follow its target, which is also true of the Atreus, for example. So basically, if you launch it, if you're firing at a fast unit, it may not hit. May hit something else. Hydroc-10 has been made in the meanwhile. We see Iziricors and a single Hydralisk. People were saying that because we're replacing the assets for Zerg units these days, that obviously something that I'm sure will come up is at some point we're going to replace the Iziricor. And Luciferius specifically was like, please keep the Chadness or something. Don't remove the Chad. Well, listen, we didn't remove the Wiggle from the Lyrilisk, so surely we can... Surely we can do that here as well. Skithercores are going to be okay over here. I mean, there's only 5 units, and a couple of them are a little bit bruised. The Gorgorkor is simply continuing to move around and traipse around the map. See what it can do. A Spraith on each base. Nexus Warden, pretty standard stuff. And a much more sizable move out now. So these armies are going to be somewhat equivalent, but not if this force gets isolated, which it does indeed. Shambler wants to keep more of these units alive if possible. But both of his idols have died. There's just so many Drakons dying here. Now, admittedly, the Lekizalisks are not with this force. So this could actually be pretty good for him. He's wiping out all the skits completely with the splash damage of the idols. And yeah, now the Lekizalisks are going to come up, but they're going to be forced to withdraw as well as more idols join the fray. Draconins are a little bit better at dealing with Lekizalisks, but again, you need the witness here, so he's going to need to, go over to the left side. Oh, he's going to pull some Hydras away, so Neblime losing a couple of units here and there. Every little bit will matter. Back at home, of course, we do have a couple idle workers. No embassy just yet. The Gorgorkor came over here and died in all of the chaos, and more skiths were made as well. An attempted flank, not too bad here, but there's so many Lekizalisks, and he did not expect that number. So now he's going to have to fall back and deal as much damage as he can with these units that have been consigned to death. Hey, we can select every unit here just for the purposes of showing off how many health bars, what the HP is like. So that kind of tells you something anyway. And again, idle workers out the wazoo. He's starting to correct that now. Going for another Warden for anti-Skith. And presumably he's going to go ahead and queue up some more. Oh, he's actually going for Grand Library. I think he wants to go for Atreus at this point, or maybe even Cantavis. Pretty big move out here for Neblime. He might just be able to take this rather immediately, right? This base was not saturated for the longest period of time. And with 7 Skiths, actually make that 9 Skiths and, 4 Lachesis. This is really deadly if he can't hold the ramp, and he's already going to be forced backward anyway. So he really wants to try to focus down the air units here if he can. And indeed, it looks like he's doing just that with the idols. But the Lachesis are making this a very, very uncomfortable position here. And yeah, the Skither cores are still in pretty good numbers. So a lot of splash damage happening to these, but there's no detection still. And even though there's a Matrix coming, I don't think it's going to be enough, right? The Lachesis can burrow to a point where you can't really do much damage to them, despite their capacity. So the workers do get evacuated, but I think it's all for naught because obviously at this point, there's still no detection, and there's no units coming out here. There's an Atreus coming, but that's actually the only thing that's training right now for Shambler. He's just getting that, and GG is called again. So yeah, a series of very fast matches, or fairly fast matches. I think most of them were sub 10 minutes, and fairly one-sided as well. Shambler really not keeping up in the macro department, I think is probably what hurt him the most. The ZVZ was, I'm not sure if it was the most competitive one, because it obviously ended before Tier 2 happened for either team, but I feel like it was one of the more interesting ones because we saw like that decision-making really set aside. Despite having the same tools, Shambler opted for a more aggressive approach and then didn't quite hit the mark, right? When he lost all those Hydras in that initial match against the Lachesis, right? That's sort of something that stands out to me anyway. Is like that was an opportunity he had to do really good damage and then expand behind it maybe, or maybe even end the game depending on how many Hydras he kept alive. Some slim margins here and there. But realistically speaking, neblime just has this very stable playstyle, and Shambler felt like Shambler wanted to just try to bust him open and like use superior micro or something, but it didn't end up working out at the end of the day. So I'll be interested in seeing what happens when we go to the next set for tomorrow's castover. Those matches will be on Boscovine, where Shambler, of course, has it's like his home map, right? His home field advantage you can think of. So we'll see whether neblime can dethrone him on that map as well, or maybe Shambler will start biting back, and that'll be a dominant 3-0 sweep the other way. But thanks for joining us, as always, and we'll be back again with another one.